The grease under my fingernails was a permanent part of me, just like the rust on the '68 Charger was a permanent part of her. My son, Leo, kicked the flat tire. "Dad, this thing is an embarrassment. Just scrap it." My brother Mark chimed in from the office doorway. "He's right, Frank. It's taking up a valuable bay at Miller & Sons." I just grunted, wiping a rag over the faded paint. This car was my dad's. It was the last piece of him I had. They saw a heap of junk. I saw a lifetime of memories. That's when a gleaming silver Bentley pulled in, a stark contrast to the grit of my Detroit garage. A man in a tailored suit stepped out. He strode past a half-repaired Mustang without a glance. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the workshop before locking onto the Charger in the corner. My brother Mark stepped forward, wiping his hands on a rag. "Can we help you?" he asked, his tone wary. The man ignored him, his focus absolute. He walked right up to my dad's car. "Frank Miller?" he asked, extending a hand. His grip was firm. "Julian Sterling." The name hit me like a wrench to the gut. The Julian Sterling, the billionaire collector? I'd seen his face in magazines, standing next to cars worth more than my entire block. Leo, ever the smart mouth, scoffed. "If you're looking for a new ride, you took a wrong turn. This one's headed for the scrapyard." Sterling shot my son a look that could freeze oil. Then, his gaze softened as it returned to the Charger. He circled it slowly, like a predator sizing up its prize. "The scrapyard would be a tragedy," he said, his voice a low hum. This car has a soul." A lump formed in my throat. A soul, he was right. This car wasn't just metal and rubber. It was the echo of my father's booming laughter when I first stalled it at 16, the sticky feel of the vinyl seats on a hot August day, the permanent smell of gasoline and oil that clung to the interior like a second skin. It was the grease stains on the headliner where Dad's hand always rested as he drove. This car wasn't built in a factory. It was built in moments. I could still see Dad, his hands as calloused as mine are now, knuckles scarred, turning a wrench with a surgeon's focus. "Every car tells a story, Frankie," he'd said, his voice raspy from a lifetime of unfiltered cigarettes and shouting over engine noise. This one's ours." He'd bought it beaten and bruised from a yard in Flint, pouring his heart and every spare dollar into it. Miller & Sons wasn't just a business name. It was a promise I made to him in a sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic, his hand cold in mine. "Don't let them scrap her, son. Don't let them." Mark stepped closer, crossing his arms, his clean polo shirt a stark contrast to my stained overalls. "A soul? It's got a cracked block and more rust than a shipwreck. What's your angle, Sterling?" Mark had always preferred the spreadsheets in the office to the oil pit. He saw Dad's legacy as the sign over the door, not the ghost in the machine. Sterling ran a manicured finger over a long dent in the rear quarter panel. A dent I knew came from a rogue shopping cart at the A&P in 1985. "An angle?" He chuckled, a dry, crisp sound that seemed out of place in the garage. "My angle, as you put it, is an appreciation for authenticity, for history." He turned to me, his gaze so intense it felt like it could see right through me. "This isn't just a '68 Charger. It's a Detroit-built R/T 440 Magnum. But this color, anniversary gold, they only made a handful. And this one," he paused, tapping the fender with a sharp rap, "has a factory modification I've only ever seen in classified engineering documents. Tell me, Frank, did your father ever mention the Panther prototype program?" The name hit me like a jolt of electricity. Panther. It was a word my dad had muttered once, late at night in the garage, thinking I was asleep. He dismissed it as a ghost story, a whisper from the old assembly lines. My heart hammered against my ribs. How could this stranger know that name? Leo scoffed, breaking the spell. Panther. Dad, what's he talking about? It's just a junker. Frank, don't get drawn into this fantasy, Mark snapped, his voice tight with frustration. If this guy wants to overpay for your scrapbook on wheels, then let him. We need the damn bay. The lines were drawn in the grease on the floor, my brother and my son on one side, their faces masks of impatience and disbelief. On the other, me and a billionaire stranger, standing guard over my father's secret. Sterling's eyes never left mine, waiting for an answer I wasn't even sure I had. The name hung in the air, thick as exhaust fumes. Stir I have Panther. A ghost story. My ghost story. I looked from Sterling's expectant face to the Charger, and for a second, I could almost see my dad in the driver's seat, a half-smile on his face, guarding his secret. I gave a slow, deliberate nod. He mentioned it, I said, my voice barely a whisper, once, called it his, Ghost in the Machine. A flicker of triumph lit Sterling's eyes. He didn't press for details. He didn't need to. He knew. Authenticity, he repeated, almost to himself. He then turned, his full attention on me, the professional collector, replaced by a man consumed by a singular desire. Frank, I won't waste your time with negotiations. I will write you a check, right now, for $600,000. The number sucked the air out of the garage. $600,000. Leo's mouth fell open. He looked from Sterling to me, his earlier mockery vaporized, replaced by sheer, dumbfounded awe. Mark's face was a rapid-fire progression of emotions, disbelief, suspicion, and then, a raw, naked avarice that made my stomach turn. You're serious, he stammered, his eyes glued to Sterling's pristine checkbook. I have never been more serious in my life, Sterling said, his voice calm and level. He pulled a sleek, silver pen from his jacket. This car doesn't belong in a repair bay. It belongs in a museum. My museum. $600,000. That was more than the garage was worth. It was a new life. It was a solution to every sleepless night, every past due invoice, every quiet fear that Miller and Sons was a sinking ship. I could see the relief in Mark's face, the dollar signs spinning in his eyes. I could see the dreams of a different life igniting in my sons. But all I could see was my father's cold hand in mine. Don't let them scrap her, son. Don't let them. Selling her felt like the same thing. A different kind of scrapyard. A sterile, climate-controlled tomb, where she'd be a static display, her soul locked behind velvet ropes. I can't, I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. It's not for sale. The silence that followed was heavier than a snapped engine block. Leo looked like I'd just slapped him. Mark's face darkened, his jaw tightening into a knot of pure fury. Sterling, to his credit, just smiled faintly. He wasn't a man used to hearing the word no, but he was a patient hunter. He tucked his pen and checkbook away and produced a business card. A man's sentiment is a powerful thing, he said, placing the card on the dusty workbench. But sentiment doesn't pay the bills. The offer stands. Indefinitely. He gave the Charger one last, lingering look, nodded to me, and was gone, the purr of his Bentley fading down the street. The moment the sound vanished, Mark exploded. Are you insane? He roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. 600 grand. Frank, that's our ticket out. That's everything. It was Dad's. I shot back, my voice trembling with a mix of grief and anger. His last wish. Dad's last wish was for this family to be secure. Mark jabbed a finger toward the office, toward the stack of unpaid bills I knew was sitting on his desk. We are drowning, Frank. Leo's college fund is empty. The bank is calling. That car is not a memory. It's an anchor, and it's pulling us all under. We'll figure it out, I insisted, my voice weak. We always do. No, Mark said, his voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. You figure it out. I'm done watching your sentimentality burn this place to the ground. He stormed off toward the office, slamming the door behind him. I felt hollowed out, the fight draining from me. I turned back to the Charger, resting a hand on its cold, dusty hood, and closed my eyes. The slam of the office door echoed like a gunshot, followed by a silence so complete it felt like a pressure in my ears. The faint hum of the overhead lights seemed to amplify the quiet, each flicker a spotlight on my isolation. I stood there, my hand still resting on the Charger's dusty hood, feeling the cold steel seep into my palm as if it were drawing the warmth right out of me. Mark's rage had evaporated, leaving behind a familiar bone-deep ache. A hesitant scuff of a sneaker on the concrete floor broke the stillness. Leo hadn't followed his uncle. He was standing a few feet away, his arms hanging limply at his sides, the earlier mockery on his face replaced by a profound confusion that made him look much younger than 17. $600,000, Dad, he said, his voice barely a whisper. It wasn't an accusation, more like a desperate attempt to make sense of an upside-down world. Uncle Mark, he wasn't wrong. About the bills, about my college. I finally turned to face him, my heart a lead weight in my chest. I know, Leo. So why? He asked, his eyes searching mine for a logical answer he could grasp. I get that it's Grandpa's. I do. But Dad, that's enough money to fix everything. How do you explain a ghost to a boy who needs a future? This car was your grandfather's masterpiece, I began, my voice raspy. Not just because it's rare. He poured his life into keeping it just like this. When he was dying, he made me promise him. He knew people who only see the rust, who only see the numbers, would want to get rid of it. He said, "Don't let them scrap her, Frankie, selling her to Sterling. That's just a fancier scrapyard. She'd be a statue behind a velvet rope. Her engine would never run again. Her story would be over." Leo's gaze drifted to the car, and for the first time, I think he really saw it. He traced the long dent on the quarter panel with his eyes. "That Panther thing, is that for real?" "I think so," I admitted. "I think Dad was part of something special, and he hid it right here in plain sight." He kicked at a loose bolt on the floor, the small, sharp sound echoing in the cavernous space. "So, what now? Uncle Mark's going to lose his mind." "I'll handle your uncle," I said, the words tasting like a lie. Leo didn't look convinced. He let out a short, frustrated sigh and headed for the side door, stuffing his hands in his pockets. I'm gonna go for a walk," he muttered, not looking back. The door clicked shut, leaving me completely alone. My eyes fell on Sterling's business card on the workbench, a small white rectangle holding the key to an easier life. A life without debt, without struggle, without the fight. I picked it up, felt the crisp, expensive cardstock between my grease-stained fingers, and I stared at the stark white card, Julian Sterling's name embossed in silver. It felt like a surrender flag. For a long moment I considered it. I could make the call, end the fight, and watch my problems drive away in a cloud of dust. Mark would be happy. Leo could go to any college he wanted, but the victory would feel like ash in my mouth. My father's ghost wouldn't just haunt the machine, it would haunt me. I tore the card in half, then in half again, and let the pieces flutter into a grimy trash can. It wasn't a decision. It was a declaration of war. Not on Sterling, but on the doubt. On the idea that my father's life's work was just an asset to be liquidated. I turned back to the Charger. "Okay, Dad," I whispered into the quiet garage. "Where did you hide it?" I started with the obvious. I pulled up the threadbare carpets, sticky with the ghosts of spilled sodas from decades ago. Nothing but rusted floor pans. I checked the trunk. Behind the spare tire well and under the rotting liner, just more rust and the smell of stale gasoline. I ran my hands under the dash, tracing the chaotic spaghetti of wires, feeling for anything out of place. A taped-up switch, a loose panel, nothing. My frustration mounted with every empty search. Mark and Leo's words echoed in my head. Nothing. 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 Anchor. Was I crazy? Was I chasing a ghost story invented by a billionaire to get a cheap score? The office door creaked open. It wasn't Mark. It was Leo. He stood in the doorway, his face pale, his earlier bravado gone. "Uncle Mark is on the phone," he said, his voice quiet, "with a lawyer." My blood ran cold. "He's talking about dissolving the partnership," Leo continued, struggling with the words, "forcing a sale of the assets to divide the company. He said the car is a company asset, and you're acting against the business's best interest. The final betrayal." He wasn't just going to argue with me. He was going to use the law to rip the car, the garage, our father's entire legacy, right out from under me. The fight wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about everything. "Get out of the office, Leo," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Lock the door behind you." He saw the look in my eye and didn't argue. He just nodded and backed out, the click of the lock echoing my resolve. Now I was fueled by more than sentiment. I was fueled by rage. I went back to the car, my mind racing. My dad was a brilliant mechanic, but he was also a creature of habit. He had rituals. Little things. He'd always tap the dashboard twice before starting the engine. He'd always check the oil, even if he'd just changed it. And he always said, "The answer's usually right where you first look." The glove box, the first place I'd ever looked for the registration as a 16-year-old kid. I'd glanced in it earlier. It was full of useless junk, brittle road maps, dried-up pens, a tire pressure gauge. I pulled it all out, tossing it onto the passenger seat. The plastic box felt shallow. I ran my fingers along the back, my knuckles rapped against it. It sounded solid, but there was a faint seam, almost invisible in the grimy plastic. I grabbed a flathead screwdriver and wedged it into the seam. With a sharp twist and a sickening crack, a false panel popped loose. My breath caught in my throat. Tucked inside the hidden cavity was an oilskin-wrapped package, tied with twine. My hands trembled as I untied the knot. Inside was a slim leather folio. I laid it on the hood of the Charger, the soft, worn leather, a stark contrast to the rusted metal. I opened it. The first thing I saw was an official-looking letter on Dodge corporate letterhead, dated 1968. It was a non-disclosure agreement, signed by my father, William Miller. Underneath it were blueprints. Not for a standard Charger. These showed a modified K-frame, reinforced suspension points, and schematics for a unique fuel delivery system. Stamped across the top in faded red ink were the words, Grodd, Project, Panther, Classified. There were handwritten notes in my dad's familiar scrawl, detailing performance trials, 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. A top speed he'd clocked on a closed track that made my eyes go wide. This wasn't just a car, it was a weapon. The final document was a personal letter, undated. "Frankie, asterisk," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and someone's finally sniffed out our old secret. Don't let the suits have her." The Panther program was designed to create the ultimate pursuit vehicle. Too fast, too dangerous, they said. So they ordered all 3 prototypes destroyed. I couldn't let that happen. This car is the only one left. It's a piece of Detroit history they tried to erase. It's not about money, it's about the truth. She belongs to the road, not to a showroom. Don't let them put her in a cage. Your old man. The office door rattled, and Mark's furious voice came through the wood. "Frank, open this damn door. I know you're in there." I carefully placed the letter back in the folio and closed it. I looked at the Charger, My charger, my father's ghost. And I knew exactly what to do. It wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about telling the story. The right way. Mark's shouting became a dull drone in the background. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady. I didn't look for Julian Sterling's number. I scrolled past it. I found the number for a woman named Sarah Jenkins. She was a writer for a vintage automotive magazine, but not one of the glossy high society ones. She wrote about the forgotten legends, the barn finds, the stories behind the rust. My dad had respected her work. He'd called her a true gearhead. I hit dial. As the phone began to ring, I looked at the office door, where my brother was still trying to break down the barrier between us. He thought he was fighting over $600,000. He had no idea what the real prize was. A woman's voice answered. "Sarah Jenkins." "Sarah," I said, my voice clear and strong. "My name is Frank Miller. My father was William Miller, and I have a story for you. It's about a ghost. It's the last one," I said into the phone, my voice low but steady. "Project Panther, the one they ordered destroyed." On the other end, there was a sharp intake of breath. Sarah Jenkins didn't waste time with disbelief. "Where are you?" "Miller and Sons Garage, Detroit. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone else. I'm 2 hours out. I'll be there." The line went dead. The office door shuddered under the impact of Mark's shoulder. "Frank, so help me God, I will call the cops." I unlocked the door and swung it open. Mark stumbled into the main bay, his face purple with rage. Leo hovered behind him, his expression torn. "It's over, Frank," Mark snarled, jabbing a finger at me. "The lawyer is drawing up the papers. We're dissolving the business. You can keep your precious rust bucket, but you'll have to buy me out. And since you just threw away $600,000, we both know you can't." He was cornering me, using the very business Dad built as the cage. "You'd do that?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You'd tear it all down? For money?" "For a future," he yelled. "Something Dad's sentimentality never gave us." I held up the leather folio. "This is Dad's sentimentality," I said. "It's also his legacy. You were about to help a billionaire steal it for a fraction of its worth." Mark just scoffed. "More ghost stories. You're pathetic." The sound of a sensible sedan pulling into the driveway cut him short. A woman with a determined stride and a camera bag slung over her shoulder got out. She walked straight into the garage, her eyes scanning the scene before landing on the Charger. "Frank Miller?" she asked, ignoring Mark completely. "Sarah Jenkins," I said, shaking her offered hand. Mark's eyes narrowed. "Who's this? Another buyer?" "This," I said, looking right at my brother, "is the truth." I led Sarah to the car and laid the folio on the hood. I opened it, revealing the blueprints and my father's letter. Her professional demeanor melted away, replaced by the pure, unadulterated reverence of a historian finding a lost artifact. She ran a finger over the classified stamp, her breath fogging in the cool air. "My God," she whispered. "It's real. The Panther. It was always just a rumor, a myth." She looked from the papers to the car, her eyes seeing past the rust and the dents, seeing the truth of it. The reinforced chassis, the experimental fuel injection. "It's all here." She turned to me. "This car doesn't belong in a museum behind a velvet rope. It belongs on the cover of every automotive journal on the planet. This is a story about a man who saved a piece of history from the corporate shredder." Mark watched, his jaw slack, as Sarah started taking pictures of the folio, the engine, the VIN plate, the handwritten notes. The flash of her camera was like a series of small explosions, each one blowing a hole in his greedy, simple plan. The $600,000 that had seemed like a king's ransom just an hour ago now felt like an insult, Sterling hadn't been buying a rare car. He'd been trying to bury a story he thought only he knew. What does this mean? Mark stammered, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. Sarah didn't look up from her camera. It means this isn't just a car anymore. It's a legend. Its value isn't what some collector is willing to pay in a back-alley deal. Its value is its story. And that story is now public. I looked at my brother. The fury was gone, replaced by the pale, sick look of a man who just realized he'd tried to sell the family Bible for the price of the paper. He saw the car, he saw the reporter, he saw the proof, and he knew he had lost. Not just the money, but the argument, the moral high ground, everything. Leo, who had been silent through it all, stepped forward. He walked over to the Charger and laid a hand on the fender, right next to where I'd put the folio. He looked at me, and for the first time I didn't see a disappointed kid. I saw a flicker of his grandfather's pride. "So," Leo said, his voice filled with a newfound awe. "What do we do now, Dad?" I looked at the car, my father's ghost, now fully awake. "Now," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "we start her up." I slid behind the wheel, the cracked vinyl groaning in protest. The air was thick with the smell of old gasoline and my father's ghost. For a moment I saw his hand covering mine on the key, teaching me to find the sweet spot. I turned it. The starter whined, a desperate, grinding sound that made Mark flinch. "See?" he started to say, a pathetic last grasp at his old argument. "It's junk." Then it caught. It wasn't a rumble, it was an explosion. A raw, concussive blast of sound that shook the dust from the rafters and rattled the tools on the walls. It was the sound of 440 cubic inches of pure Detroit anger, untamed by modern mufflers, a guttural roar that had been silent for 2 decades. The whole car trembled with a barely contained violence. Sarah Jenkins' face was pure ecstasy, a historian hearing a dead language spoken fluently. Leo's mouth was hanging open, a wide, delirious grin spreading across his face as he felt the raw power vibrating through the concrete floor. Mark stumbled back a step, his face pale. The sound wasn't just loud, it was accusatory. It was the voice of the very thing he had called worthless, and it was screaming its value at him. "Frank," he choked out, his voice barely audible over the engine's monstrous idle. I didn't know, I swear." I met his eyes over the hood of the shaking car. I gave him no comfort, no absolution. I just let the engine do the talking for me. I gave it a short, sharp rev, and the resulting shockwave made a stack of old tires wobble. It was a sound of defiance. Sarah was already on her phone, her fingers flying. "I posted the photo of the folio and a 10-second audio clip," she said, her voice electric with excitement. "It's Frank. It's everywhere. The forums, the blogs, they're calling it the find of the century." The story was no longer mine. It belonged to the world now. As if on cue, my own phone began to buzz in my pocket. The vibration felt different against the thrum of the engine. I pulled it out. The name on the screen made a cold smile touch my lips. Con, Julian Sterling. He'd seen the news. His quiet little treasure hunt was now the lead story. The cage he'd wanted to build was broken before he'd even bought the lock. Mark stared at the phone, then at me, his face a mask of utter defeat. He finally understood. The real value was never about the money. It was about who got... Okay, I have to ask for your genuine opinion on this. After all the years my family relentlessly made fun of me for keeping this car, do they deserve a single penny of the money now that it's turned out to be a jackpot?